Next order of business is the roll call of members. Please indicate your presence when the machine is open. If all the members voted, Tyler, roll.
Well, hello there, listener. Welcome to Session Sessions. I'm your host, Blake Johnson. This is our first episode back since we adjourned back in May, and we are now the #1 podcast about the General Assembly that is also hosted by a member that is a Democrat. So within that very narrow genre, we are currently on top. Thank you to the tens of you who've helped us make that happen. But today's a really special episode. I'm very excited about it. About a month ago, I became a dad, which is the coolest thing that has truly ever happened to me. My son, Lynn, has changed our lives in a pretty significant way. And it got me thinking a lot about what that means for my public service, and especially with session just a few months away. So I asked two of my very good friends who also happen to be dads of small children and elected officials in the House with me, if they would spend some time just giving me some advice and answering some questions and helping me prepare for what it looks like to be representative dad. So with that, I'd like to bring on my good friends, Representative Mitch Gore of Indianapolis and Representative Ryan Hatfield of Evansville. Guys, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Blake.
Ryan isn't grateful to be here. So cool. Okay, so
I'm not here by choice.
So before we jump into the dad stuff, I do want to ask you all, like, this is a podcast about the legislative session. Right now, it's interim study committees. Anything to share on, I guess first, maybe Ryan, why don't you explain what the interim study committees are, and then anything that's happened in yours so far. Mitch, why don't you jump in after that, just so folks have some awareness about what this time of year is like for all of us.
So legislative committees are kind of sometimes described as the workhorse of the legislature, where we review bills and ideas. And in session, they are the first necessary step for a bill to pass in order to make its way through the legislative process. In the interim, there is not that kind of next step, and just because it passes committee doesn't necessarily mean it'll even become a bill, much less get a vote on the floor. But the interim committee has experts and lay people that serve on the committee with legislators to review issues, bill ideas, or topics that the General Assembly or the Speaker have decided that they should be reviewed. And so they first are passed through the leadership and then created for ideas. And then if the chairman of those interim committees decide to study them, they are studied. Currently, I serve on a healthcare task force, as well as labor and a few other interim committees. And essentially, we are studying ideas that may be brought forward, or like in the healthcare task force, we're simply studying healthcare prices and ways to bring those down and offer ideas to the General Assembly as a whole of how to do that.
Yeah, so I'm on two committees that are meeting, and one of them is very practical, roads and transportation. We're approving specialty license plate applications. So all those specialty plates that you see out on the road, we approve 5 of those a year. So it's like a very practical component of the committee. And then in another committee, we're just looking ahead to session, and we're having the major stakeholders for that committee come in and tell us their priorities and tell us issues they're seeing. So it really depends on, like Ryan was saying, what the chair kind of wants it to be like. And one of the study committees I've been assigned to isn't meeting. Really a hodgepodge of different ways to go about it.
Yeah, I'm on commerce, and we've had a committee hearing so far on cybersecurity, which was interesting. They're also going to be hearing testimony on cannabis legalization, like the economic side of it, at least, and a conversation about AI. So Commerce Committee is actually pretty interesting in the interim. What's also interesting is I thought these were called summer study committees, but now third session, and I realized that it's almost Christmas and we're still going to be meeting. So kind of an interesting component of it as well. Okay, so today, though, is about legislative service and fatherhood. And these two guys have quite a bit of a head start on me in this regard. And so I guess so Ryan, you've got 3 small kids, including a fairly new one. Mitch has a 1.5 years old. When did those babies come compared to session for both of you?
Mindy was born in June of 22, so we were out of session, gearing up for an election. The special session on abortion happened like immediately thereafter.
So you were right back into the building as far as it was going on.
Yeah.
And then Hatfield, of your three, were any born like during session, right before session? How'd that play out?
No, so Olivia was born in July, and Rose and George. Rose was born in November. George was born in December. And just quickly, I'd say there is a difference in the time that Olivia and I bonded and the time that Rose and George and I bonded. That first 6 months with Olivia being at home every night was impactful. It mattered.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a total of 3 months before we go back to session, which initially felt like plenty of time, and now that he's here and real, feels like no time at all. With both of you having had brand new babies, either right before or really, really right before session started, what stood out to you about that experience?
I just think that with Mindy coming right before the special session on abortion, and that session being dedicated to an issue that essentially only really impacts women, and having like a new daughter, it just made it a lot more real for me. Like I wasn't discussing issues that were abstract anymore. And this last session, it was kind of the same way. When I've always supported traditional public schools, but we're gearing up to send Mindy to one. I've always supported trying to find ways to curb gun violence, because it primarily affects, kids, at least in our community. Or, for example, the safe storage of firearms. But now it's like, it's tangible. It's more real to me than I thought it could be, and so it's added a sense of urgency to what we do over there. I think that's probably the biggest impact for me after having Mindy and then going into session.
And I agree that it absolutely impacts the way that issues are framed and the way that I vote and view different issues. I'll take it from a different perspective of just how your perspective changes on being home and being present and being with your children, and knowing that, for me, I spent 3 months in Indianapolis, not coming home every night, and what that means to my children and what it means to my wife's life, right? So, Kendra becomes essentially a married single parent. And while there's a lot of variations of parenthood, and I'd like to believe I provide some support, she gets used to a certain level of support that is probably higher in my mind than in hers, but through, May through December. But then January comes and I'm gone most of the time, and it's a total restructuring of the household. And so being sensitive to that idea, but also ensuring that I'm making the most of my time with my kids because of the time spent away from them becomes much more important as well.
I think obviously Mitch and I have it a little bit easier because we get to go home every night, and that's never lost on me throughout this experience. That I think about, honestly, as I've been like terrified of the idea of leaving for 14-hour days. I'm like, man, I still get to come home though. I get to like go to the bassinet or the crib and like kiss him goodnight no matter what. Ryan, like for you, and we've talked about this, I know how hard that is for you. Like, how do you balance your role as a legislator with the responsibilities at home, knowing that you've got such a long drive? And I just want to say really quickly that there is a 95% chance that I inexplicably start crying while we're having this conversation. And it's only because all the emotions are so new for me right now. So if you choose to make fun of me, I accept it, but I just want to go ahead and put that on the table. But Ryan, go ahead.
Well, I think that, I used to say that being an Indianapolis legislator was the easiest, best way to serve in the General Assembly. And I've kind of changed my mind on that, because while it's very difficult, and I'll talk about that in a second, it also provides clarity. Kendra doesn't expect me home at 6 and then I'm home at 8, or I don't tell my children that I'll be at their game and then I miss their game because something's happened throughout the day. when I'm gone, I'm gone. And my family knows that. And so I think from that perspective, it can be a little easier on me than for you two, because Kendra doesn't expect me home. My kids don't expect me home. And but for them, I think that it probably provides a little less support for Kendra at home. I think that my kids, for the most part, try to miss me, but I certainly miss them much more than they miss me, rightfully so. And so one of the ways that we've built into our lives just to make sure that we keep a relationship consistent is I answer the phone in the morning and get to FaceTime my kids. And then at night, I call them every night right before bed and am able to FaceTime them so that I try to see and talk to my kids every single day, twice a day. I think that's really important for me and in my service, quite frankly, just to make sure that when you are getting home on Thursday night, that you have some context of how their life's been, what their week's like. And although they're young, there are times they get in trouble at school, or times that they're not having a good week, or times that they're more whiny or upset or tired than other weeks. And having that perspective when you get home on Thursday is really important to me, but also I think important for the family dynamic.
Mitch, you obviously are going home every night. Your experience and my experience are going to be pretty similar. How have you sort of done the balancing? Like, what's kind of been the process to make that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I typically throughout the week, I'll forego like having a lunch if I don't think it's going to be productive. If it's a lunch just to, with one of our friends in the hallway or another legislator, I'll usually skip that if I have enough time, and I'll, haul ass back out to the east side just to be home for a little bit. And I've started doing that because I think my first two sessions, I didn't, I don't know if anybody totally knows what they're doing except for Dr. Garcia Wilburn, who passed a bill in her first year. But that wasn't me, right? I didn't know what I was doing. And now I realize that so much of the work happens outside of the hours that we're in the physical chamber. If you want to get stuff done, it's all really happening outside of those hours. So there's a lot of late nights and important discussions and things like that. If you're really working a bill, and knowing that, I won't be home at night if something, is going on, makes me want to, go home in the middle of the day. And I think I'm kicking back and forth. I've been working at the sheriff's office on Fridays, since we typically don't have, session on Fridays. I think I might cut that out in the coming session and spend it, here at home, with the girls. So, and like Ryan said, just phone calls throughout the day. If I can't go home around lunchtime, FaceTime is wonderful. I'm really grateful for that. And so we just make it work. But I also want to mention, it's not lost on me. I've often thought about how tough it is for legislators not from Central Indiana. And now within the context of like having a kid, now I just appreciate it even more. And since Ryan's on the pod, I just wanted to mention that. So mad respect.
I appreciate that. Since you hit you hit my mentorship earlier in your answer, so I appreciate you coming back around.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't realize, so Ryan was assigned as Mitch's mentor. This happens when you get elected for the first time. You get assigned a mentor who shepherds you through the experience, teaches you everything you need to know about how to be a legislator. And today is actually their first mentor meeting now that Mitch is in his third session. So it's going really well. How did... So, Ryan, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say, I learned through doing, or I learned through watching. And nothing really prepares you for it, but I got to see Ryan in action, and that's all I think that's all anybody really needs. I'd rather have Ryan not talking to me but leading by example than have somebody I don't respect, trying to tell me what to do, but be totally incapable of putting it into action. So,
well said. Well said. Ryan, did you have FaceTime when Olivia was born? Was that still, I mean, I guess I don't know how long FaceTime's been around, or time means nothing to me these days. So
yeah, I don't know if that's a comment on my age or Apple's experience, but yes, we did have FaceTime, and that's been a part of our lives since she's been born, and useful. I mean, look, I think having no contact is one level of relationship, and then telephone and FaceTime and personal contact. And the closer you move to being able to see each other and interact with each other, it is so vital for them to be able to see me and me to see them. It's important to me anyways.
You know, you guys are both at the stage now, at least, I mean, with two of your kids, maybe with George a little bit, like when you come home after being gone for the week, what's that like? You know, I mean, and maybe Mitch, you start, I know like you're home every night, but like when you're home and you're back for the weekend, like does Mindy feel that? Is she as excited about it as you are?
So she's just started to, probably within the last month, like really be able to say like how excited she is for different things, or to communicate like genuine emotion. And so, yeah, dude, I walk in now and she says like, she perks up. She's like, "Hi, Dada," or if I'm getting ready to, the hardest thing about, and I don't know what it's going to be like during session, but the hardest thing lately is when I go to work, like she'll get upset and she'll change like her tone of voice. So she can say like, "Bye, Dada, love you, bye," and lately it's been like, "Bye, Dada, love you, love you," and, or she like, oh, and then the putting her arms out more, like for like another hug, or like clinging to you like a little monkey. You want to talk about like superhuman baby strength, like if she doesn't want to let go. And now I can't remember what the question was because I got so wrapped up in.
No, I liked that. That's good for me.
Right.
That's good for me.
Yeah, no, she recognizes it. Weekends, even now, are a special time. Like I don't have to go to work. They're just, it's just special. So.
And then Ryan, for you know, I've been around when you've FaceTimed with the girls. Like, you get home from the week. I'm sure that experience has got to be pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I'm through age 5.5. Every day gets better. I tell parents that all the time. I can't speak to after 5.5, but at 5.5, every day gets better because their ability to communicate with you is so fun, and their thoughts are so original, and their brains are so talented and smart that it is a lot of fun to watch them grow. But certainly very special to get home on Thursday nights and have, instead of a little baby that you go over and say hi to and tickle and play with and pick up and hear a giggle or two, but to have them now run around the corner and back towards the back door and jump into my arms is a lot of fun. And I tell people all the time, the process of me leaving the General Assembly, whether that is 1 year or 10 years, probably started last February when one Monday morning Olivia started crying at the door and said, "Don't go." And so that part is really difficult and really hard, but we do it, and in my opinion, we do it for a really good cause, and hope that our children watch us fighting for something bigger than ourselves, and that matters to them, because they certainly pay quite a price.
That's a really awesome point, because I feel like I've always served for the right reasons. Like I care about the issues we fight for. I believe in the legislation I file. All of this obviously has some pretty significant value to me. But then they hand this kid to me a month ago, and the whole thing, the colors get brighter, the dark parts get darker. I mean, it is insane the way that now it's not just service for me or for the community. It's like, I want this kid to have the world he deserves, and the state that he deserves, and the city he deserves. And that's a pretty remarkable thing. And Ryan, I think you and I, actually Mitch, all three of us have talked about like how I think I logically knew that was going to happen, but like there was no way to understand it until he was in my arms. And I'm like, holy shit, like what we have to do is so important for him and for Mindy and for Rose and Olivia and George. Like it's just a completely different level. And I assume that you guys have had that same, sort of ta-da moment in your mind.
And they can really challenge you too. As they get older, they'll start to ask questions about what you're doing or why you're doing something, and to have to explain it to your child isn't the same, quite frankly, as just simply explaining it to a group of people or to a constituent. And sometimes you really do have to think like, okay, why do I think that, or why am I for this or that? And it's fun to think through that with them and for them, and then to ask them their own opinion. But I view my role as a dad as not to create one set of ideas, but to provide the opportunity for her to feel however that she decides that she wants to feel, as long as she can think through a problem. And it's kind of funny to listen to some serious and some not so serious issues that they care about and develop ideas about. And that part becomes a lot of fun over time.
I just have a couple more questions for you guys. One is actually kind of tactical, and it's how do you navigate public scrutiny and privacy and all of that, which for us, we've sort of sacrificed in many ways. How do you handle that when it comes to your families? Because that's obviously something I'm thinking a lot about. Like, it seems like the vitriol is getting worse. Like I try not to go on Twitter as much anymore because the stuff people say to me and about my family already is really kind of intense. But how do you guys kind of navigate through that?
Yeah, so my background's law enforcement. My wife started in major felony courts and then moved to the prosecutor's office, ended up in major felony sex crimes, and then was at the Julian Center, our state's largest DVSA service provider, for a long time. And the stuff she's seen and the stuff I've seen, specifically, regarding kids, we just decided immediately, like, we're not ever broadcasting Mindy's face on social media. There's just, we take it so seriously. Like, we're never going to put a proud parent of a, whatever school honor student, because that tells people, where she goes to school. So we blur her face in social media. And we have had one specific credible threat towards the family, and I had it investigated both by the agency I work for and the Indiana State Police, and it's it's really bizarre. That's the closest I've gotten to just like resigning on the spot, but it's tricky when all you're trying to do is, the right thing. It's just strange. Not to spook, not to spook any listeners or you, Blake, but like, it'll be okay. It's just, you do have to be cognizant of it, and you have to seek out best practices from professionals. And it's just something you didn't, that most parents don't have to do. So
Ryan, before you jump in, because I'm interested in your thoughts on this too, I would simply say that we were trying to get pregnant during SB1. And Natalie quite publicly shared story of her miscarriage and like everything we were kind of thinking going into that. And I remember some of the social media output we got, or outreach. Some of it was wonderful. I mean, so supportive and sweet and kind and loving. And then there were the ones that were like, you aren't able to have kids because of your positions on this issue. And those are the same people, exactly the same people who are now saying some of the most horrible stuff on social media. So it is scary, and makes you rethink kind of the way we approach even just security at the house and all that. I mean, it's just all very different in my mind now. But Ryan, you want to share a little bit?
Well, I would just say that public service certainly, I think, brings some of these issues to light, and we all have threats on us and our families, and most of them are not legitimate, but from time to time they are, and they're unsettling for us generally, no matter, and certainly when they are aimed at our children. I mean, we've walked out of forums before with people yelling at my kids that I'm trying to kill them, right? And having to explain to a 3-year-old why a lady thinks that I'm trying to kill her, and having conversations with your children that generally you would hope most parents aren't having to have. And I think that is just indicative of where we are in society and that we need to bring the temperature down wholly. As far as social media goes, I mean, look, I think I'll utilize my time to kind of share, if you're not aware of the data out there around social media and what it does to young people and children, it is almost exclusively decided that social media creates long-term indications of stress and problems and issues. And the younger that they are exposed to it, the more likely they are to develop issues around image and self-confidence and so on and so forth. And that's included in parents who really share a lot about their children on social media. When you blow that up to even a state rep or a state senator or a public figure of any kind, and certainly while Mitch is closer to Taylor Swift than Blake or I are, we certainly are in the public eye a little more than others, and it creates even more stress. And so we've made the same decision that Mitch has, in that we share very little on social media, family photos and some photos that we've decided are appropriate for the public. Outside of that, you see a lot less from us than I think you may have had we not been in public life.
So I have one final question. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time. What advice do you have for me coming into session in terms of how I should be thinking about and approaching this for the first time?
I know you, I think, well enough to know that you're already asking all the right questions. And for me to think that I could give you any, sage advice that you haven't already thought about, like, you're a good person and a good dad with a good partner, and everything's going to be fine. You just have to figure out what works for you. But, you obviously love Lynn with all your heart, and you'll, find a way to make it work. And I wanted to take the time to say everything is going to go fine. You know, you guys will be able to do whatever you have to do to get through it. And I just want to, touch base with you after session. Maybe we could do this again to see how it went for you, and what session is like with a little baby. But no real advice. I usually go to you guys for advice, so I know you'll figure it out.
And Ryan never responded to those texts for you the first session. So, but I did. I was happy to do it. Ryan, what advice do you have for me, my friend?
Mitch did not know that you have to send me 5 or 6 texts in a row before I respond. And had he gotten to number 6, I'm sure I would have responded. My advice is, on Thursday night, don't lay down on the couch and say that you're really tired. Not a good idea. And to be present. And I'm not sure that that's advice for just a legislative dad, but I just think that it's really difficult to be present, because politics, for those of us in it, is oftentimes consuming. And that is part in our DNA, and that is part the realities of the job, but it can be very consuming, and there has to come a time for you to put your phone down. And that becomes more important as a dad, and more important as they get older. And I just think that as somebody who can be very consumed in my work, it's really important for me to be present and to recognize that we have 200 years of problems that have developed to today, and that 2 hours with my children are probably more important towards the solutions to those problems than 2 hours of me on my phone or trying to, work on legislative work during my family time. So to be present, and that when the legislative session ends on Thursday nights, you make sure you're ready for home, because for me, that's been very important.
Well, guys, I can't thank you enough. The reason I wanted to do this was honestly, genuinely, because I wanted to hear what you guys had to say. Not that I believed this would be great content, and maybe it will be, who knows, but this has just been about, you guys are my 2 friends who also, as we were trying to get pregnant and get get to this point, which we are now. Like, you were extraordinary friends during all of that, and people that have checked in on us since he was born quite a bit too. So you guys are the best. I'm grateful to serve with you and to know you. And with that, I really just want to go back and hang out with my kid. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back for sessions when session commences.